Hey, so I know we should be starting pretty soon, but I want to give 5 minute booster for the ones to just got off the previous childhood stream and to pause the audible. So you have 5 minutes, take a rest, and we will be starting with this open source session. So see you back. Oh my god, I forgot to myself. So, hey, welcome to this Global Hack Week. We are on the Open Source Week, and today it's day number 4. So, I know I am late for this Global Hack Week, but I I have a lot of things happening around my life. I'm very happy to share this shortly with you. Probably for the next Global Hack Week, you will get the news. Or if I see you, it's hackathon, like in person. Well, we can discuss there. So, just saying again, I'm really happy to be back in this Global Hack Week, and I am going to talk about one of my favorite topics around engineering, around software, around everything in the world. That's open source, right? So uh, I mentioned in the Discord post that this is going to be really a starting phase from open source, right? So I was checking the agenda for the sessions of my other colleagues, and I see they're like focusing on technologies that are open source. That's great. Things like MTP servers, by Bullet, for example. Way it's having the MCP one. What else? GitHub profile with carry, things like that. And I think it's great. And talking about specific projects in open source, or talking about open source projects, giving their appropriate shout out, it's amazing. But I want to talk directly about the topic, about open source in general. So this is a great introduction. If you like have like more or less knowledge, if you don't know anything about open source, and you're wondering like, okay, it's great, what are they talking about these technologies, what are they different from private software, for example, and what's private software, what's open source, what's free software, and that's what we are going to discuss. Before entering in all this, let me just share this with you that it's the check-in link. Please go check in yourselves, and you will receive your community points, and you will have the chance to get swag, right? So that said, let me start sharing my screen, and we can start with this. Uh, my third screen in here, sure, and you should see it now. Uh, okay, great. Learning open source with Alberto. So this is the session 1, and we are going to take a look at this in a second. Oh, I think the date it's wrong. Oh, my bad. Sorry. But yeah, this is present for the Global Hack Week open source. For example, here the OSS stands for open source, right? So that's the first clarification and the first concept we are covering in this, and this is just the first slide. Um, the workshop series consists of 4 sessions. That doesn't mean this is going to be one per session. I mean, we're not going to have the getting started in this first one, then the building welcoming communities in the second one, how to contribute in the third one, and best practices in the fourth one. No, that's not how it works. I'm going to be covering these 4 concepts in all these 4 sessions, but to be real and to be completely honest, some of these one requires, I will say it, requires more focusing on our part. And if you're just starting in this world, um, I wanted to give more detail and more emphasis into the getting started, for example. So probably this is going to be the part 1 session, the one that we have right now, and the following session, a little bit of that. And then we are going to start with the building welcoming communities, right? Uh, Hey Alberto, this is so cool. I'm a beginner too. Thanks. Oh, hey, thank you, Tommy. So it's great that you're here because I I really wanted to give these sessions for those one who are just starting in this amazing world. And I hope I share with you one of my patients that it's open source again, and you end up with a great idea of why open source, why this is happening, and why it's important. And well, start sharing with the rest of the world, right? So thank you, Tammy. So yeah, we are going to cover these four concepts, or the overview of these sessions will be this. I mean, um, getting started, understand what open source is, and make your first contribution. Right? The building welcoming communities. It will teach you the, I will say, backbone of open source. Which is the community itself, right? I am big fan of communities. I always mention that one of the main reasons why I choose software engineering or software as my career path, because I'm a mechatronics engineer actually. So software is just one quarter of my major, right? But then why I didn't choose electronics, why I didn't choose mechanics, why I didn't choose control systems, and I choose software over that. It's because of the communities, because of the people that loves to share and loves to teach and loves to learn, right? And the backbone again of open source, it's the community itself. If you don't have a community, then you don't truly have open source, I will say. So in that part, in that session, we will cover how to create inclusive, engaging environments for contributors, for your communities, and not only welcoming but health communities, right? And I'll give you some examples of this. um, I think I didn't introduce myself, and I am so rude because of that. Sorry, sorry, sorry. Uh, I usually just assume that people know me here in these streams, but let's take a step back and let me introduce myself again, right? My name is Alberto Camarena. I am a mainly hacking coach, but also I am a software engineer. I currently work at Vigo. I recently graduated from mechatronics engineering in Instituto Politécnico Nacional, which is in Mexico. I'm from Mexico, and I now I am a campus expert alumni, but I was a campus expert. And often people confuse being campus expert with being very like technology or technically fluent, like if you're super pro at some technology. But it isn't. The main idea of being a campus expert actually, it's the community part. It's the ability to maintain and host in your local environments, in this case, your university campus, for example, healthy communities. So again, and I'm making a huge deal out of this because I truly believe in the community power and in the community stage over open source being one of the most important ones. So, passing to the next part, it's how to contribute, explore contribution workflow, discuss from issues, pull requests, etc. Right. So this third part is going to be like the most technical one. Um, we're going to try to find um, and well, I give you some resources to get starting these contributions. But as we're going to cover in this one, not all contributions need to be technical, and not all contributions needs to be like heavy stuff. Because people usually tend to believe our first contribution is going to change the world and change how technology works, and that's not how it works. But don't worry. Again, we are just entering this beautiful world. Take my hand and join me over this trip, right? Finally, we're going to discuss the best practices, discover how to maintain healthy projects with things like templates, automations, documentation, and well, you will easily get to identify projects that are actually healthy in many ways after we end up with this series of workshops, right? So I want to say by the end of the series, you will be ready to start to contribute and to help maintain real open source projects. Or you are going to be at least informed enough to be really sure of what people mean actually with open source the next time you hear it, right? So that's the main idea of this series. Again, welcome, and let's jump to the next slide, which is the objectives for this first part, at least, right? Understand what open source means and how it differs from free software, because I think nobody speaks as much as it should be now of free software, but I think it's worth mentioning. Recognize the motivations and principles behind open source. Get familiar with some things that are basic for contributing, which is Git and GitHub concepts. Again, uh, apologize for all the rest of the users that doesn't have a GitHub account and prefer, for example, Gitbucket or GitLab. Probably if you use one of these technologies, you're not a beginner. But for the beginners, just have in mind that GitHub, it's just an option for me, at least. It's the option I use. It's the option I love, but it's just an option. The one that it's almost that everything, it's Git. I mean, there are other version control systems, but Git, I haven't heard of anyone that doesn't use Git. If you do, please let me know here on the comment section. For example, I'll be trying to be banning of the comment section. I see here, hello from Pakistan. Hello, great to have you here. What time is it for you, actually? That will be a great question. Also, we're going to get, learn a common open source technology and project structure and make a small first contribution. So, welcome to this beautiful world. Let's get started with the first. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I broke this when editing, but with the agenda. Welcome and overview. Remember, the purpose of this first part, at least, is to make open source approachable for anyone. So, if again you're a beginner, don't worry. This session it's just for you. We will focus on practical no code, low code contributions, and we are going to. Um, Sorry about that. I didn't fix this, but I am going to be the mentor. Why and what it's open source, right? Open source, in simple terms, means that our source code is freely available to you. Um, Here, I want to make a clarification, and the thing in English is that free means many things, right? In Spanish, for example, you have free as libre, which will be more like freedom, and free as gratis will be that it has no cost. And what we mean in open source and in free software in general, it's that you are free with the freedom. Not it doesn't mean this won't have cost. So first parenthesis, and this is a big parenthesis. People usually relate things that are open source to be free as it has no cost, and that's not true. Um, One example, you could think, for example, of the long language models that are like the big thing right now, right? Which ones are free? Well, they have free tires, right? And you can try them, you can use them, but at certain point you will receive like, hey, you exceed your number of uses, your number of tokens. I don't know, depends on the product. You need a premium subscription to use this. But also there are open source. So that means you can take that model and or at least a version of it and download it in your computer, run it locally, and use it without a problem. So first clarification here: free. It's not at it not cost. It's as freedom. You have the freedom to use it, right? And the availability to use. or even modify and share. And these three actually come from the free software movement, not itself from the open source. But don't worry, we'll take that in a second. So why? So now we have, sorry, the what. What is open source? Open source it's code again that you can access to the no, no, sorry, that you have access to the source code. The source code meaning whatever language it is written on, for example C, for example Java, for example Python, etc. Right? That you can access to it, that you can read it, you can learn from it, you can execute it, you can modify it, and you can share whatever copies of it you made, or upgrades, for example. And in the other hand, you have private software. For example, Microsoft Word, right? You cannot access the source code of Microsoft Word. You actually don't know how it works internally. You can have the binaries, the hex files, the executable, the encrypt format of it, in a way, but you cannot modify Microsoft Word. You cannot say like, "Oh, I don't know, I don't like the code suggestion, sorry, the autocomplete suggestion for the syntax. I will modify it." No, you don't have it. You have, on the other hand, things like what's LibreOffice actually, that tries or aims to do the same. Another great comparison, for example, it's for modeling. For example, you have Maya, right? Or 3D Max, which are products from Autodesk, if I remember well. But you can purchase Autodesk Suite, you can purchase Maya, you can purchase 3D Inventor, all of this software. But even if you purchase it, you cannot modify anything from the program. You just have the executable files. Now, you have Blender, sorry, Blender. And Blender, it's amazing because it has a really great and a big community again, behind it. You can download the executable files for render, that's true, but also you can download the source code. There's a GitHub repository that contains all of the code there. You can modify how Blender works. You can create plugins, you can create add-ons, you can create and push to make your changes in the final product, right? So first example, Blender, amazing, right? So I think with this examples, with this terminology, with what I just mentioned, now you have clear what it's open source, which is our first step in this journey. First, understanding what it's open source, right? Great. Okay. Let me see some comments. 3:30 a.m. here. Okay, dude, you have to take a nap for this. But hey, thank you for being here. Hey, Alberto, good morning from Nepal. 4 a.m. here. Wow. So, thanks for joining. For me, it's 4, but not a.m. p.m. So great. Thank you for being here, and I hope this helped you. So we have the what. What's open source? Then let's pass to the why, because you may be wondering, okay, what's the main intention here? First, I will say learning. If you take a look, or if you're starting in open source or in engineering, software engineering in general, and you just receive like black boxes of pieces of software that already work, you cannot learn from them. You can only rely on um, code fragments, examples, tutorials, YouTube videos, your assignments at school. I don't know, things like that. Now, GPT, long language models to ask for questions, but you cannot have like the ability to learn from real world projects if it wasn't thanks to open source. Thanks to open source, you can go and, for example, learn how a compiler works, how an open source system works. Sorry, I was going to say open source system, but no, uh, operative system works, how programming language works, how things like, again, 3D modeling program works as Blender, how the LibreOffice packages works, how you can create this kind of projects, not only in terms of organization, but in terms of technology. What's inside every software that we admire, it's available for us thanks to open source. So one of the big reasons, one of the reasons I will say it's very, very important, it's for learning. And the other one's collaboration, right? Collaboration. Imagine trying to build something as big as Blender just by yourself, or if it wasn't thanks to open source, that it's a community that loves the product, loves the idea, shares your vision, and wants to push their work to make that real too. Else you will have to pay developers, pay a team, and that's only because they don't believe in your vision, because they just have or want to be paid for a labor or a work. And that's not wrong. Actually, for example, I do that in my work, right? You're truly blessed if you do share a vision and you want to push for it, and actually you get paid for doing that. But yeah, the collaboration thing here, and this doesn't mean either, and I want to clarify that open source means you are going to receive the others help and others work, and you don't have to pay them. No, that's not true as well. um, Actually, there's a specific section, and I want to discuss that further, of how to get paid on open source. But don't worry, for the moment, you just believe that if someone tells you, hey, I have this vision of a product and I already make this MVP, and you say like, okay, I love that vision, I think we can modify this and we can share this, and we can change this other one, and that way this product can be better because I am also going to use it. That's open source. And not only you, but you create a community around it, and that's how projects go big, right? The second thing I have listed here, it's fast innovation and iteration. um, I don't have to mention this why. I think it's self-explained because of the first one. Collaboration and the learning on the project itself make this second part um, easy, as I would say, to understand. Why fast innovation? Because you're constantly exposed to a lot of code, a lot of work from others, and iteration because you get constant feedback from the community. You get a constant feedback on the product, on what you're building. Um, and also, if you want to get this more, I don't want to say like self-censor, but this is not only about communities. This also helps you as an individual. It helps you a lot, and this is why I always mention, for example, in the mainly hacking, we have the fellowship. One of my favorite tracks, it's open source, and I always tell the hackers this: for building reputation and community, imagine you work on a big project like React from Meta, right? And you're a contributor. You can show that you contribute on that project. You're on the contributors list. There's an actual Git blame line that tells your name, your user, that tells that it's you. So you earn reputation. You now have a CB thing to share. And imagine you work in a private software company, as I am, and now if I want to share what I have done, I will have to explain and tell. But I can now show the product because this is closed, and either the code lines, right? So, well, they have to believe me. Uh, that's why I also contribute to open source because that helps building the repetition and also the community around it. Again, I love this. So the final part, it's about security, ensuring transparency and longevity, right? So there's a lot of eyes. There's a lot of eyes not only learning but inspecting our code. And if there's some bug, there's some error, the healthy community it's going to point at, and that will be fixed. That will be repaired. So I think you have now a great idea of why to do open source and what it is, right? Of course. Uh, hey, Alberto, hope in to say hi. It's pretty late here, as always, and I have lectures in the morning, so I probably go sleep. But this seems like such a cool intro stream. Hey, thank you so much. The Great 404. It's one of our common names that we say here in Twitch. So it's a pleasure to have you here around, buddy. Love it. So another high, another couple of highs. Great. So let's continue with this. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, open source versus free software, and I want to make this pause again. Let me drink some water. It helps you read the slides. There's a small line, a really small line between open source and free software. I would say, probably free software people are going to hate me for this, but you probably heard a lot, but a lot open source, open source, open source, open source. But have you ever heard of free software? Raise your hand. Take a moment to write a comment here in the comment sections. And I think it's important to mention free software because it's on how open source was born. And you probably heard the story of Linus Torvald, which a lot of people consider the father of open source. But have you heard of Rich Stallman? It's an engineer. I will say engineer. Yeah, uh, that worked at an MIT laboratory. And there's this story of I do. Hey, amazing. So Rich and Solomon worked at this laboratory, and they have a constant problem with a machine. And he was saying like, I hate calling GCC. What do you mean with GCC? I don't understand that. Sorry. So continuing with the story, and he was saying like I hate to be calling support. I'm an engineer. I worked at MIT. I probably know how to fix this, and I probably know how to make it better so it won't break again. So why don't you give me the schematics, give me the source code, give me everything I need for this machine I already bought? Well, not me, but the institute, and I will work on it. And the company refused. So I don't know if there's like a big story behind this, or something that happened, that this was just the last drop on the glass, or actually this was like the fire that burned everything. But thanks to that, Richard Stallman became the founder of the movement of free software. And free software, it's more based on ethical principles, on how things should be, more than in practicity. So free software has these rules that we mentioned before, of having the ability to read, learn from the code, source code, to execute it, to modify it, and to share modifications of that source code. these principles, this philosophy around the free software were really strong. And so, even you can consider this as an apolitical movement. I don't know. I think a lot of people end up not liking the, how to say it, strong thoughts of Richard Stallman. And well, the open source community born from this. But instead of ethical and from principles that should be followed by the free software movement, they focus more on practicity. They focus more on what you gain from all of this, and that's the all other things we already cover, like the collaboration, quality, learning, reusable, um, security proof, etc., right? So both movements have like the same origins, but actually open source born from free software. They just emphasize in different aspects. Again, free software, it's more unethical, and I will even say more political thing. And open source is more like practical, right? It's more like companies saying, yeah, let's do that because that helps me move fast, evolve, you know, like these short-minded things. And I will say, I would like to give the shout out to free software movement. Um, it's not that commonly mentioned, but I do think it's worth you take a time to understand the reasons behind Richard Stallman and all the other actors in this great movement. So yeah, thank you so much for that. Hey, Thami says, according to Google, GCC stands for Genial Compiler Collection, a free and open source suite can compiles and converts high level programming code into machine readable code. Oh yeah, Genius over. Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah. You mean that with GCC, right? So yeah, I get you now. Yes. I don't know. I don't want to be this history class at full because yeah, it's interesting, but I don't know. I'm not that well informed on then what happened next. Like how will how Linux turbos become the face of open source, what happened with Linux, what happened with Genio tools, these kind of things. Very interesting. I didn't know of this difference. Thank you. Yeah, no worries. Great. So uh, let's continue. Thank you so much for putting me the attention. Now let's start with Git and GitHub basics. If you don't know Git, okay, let me see. I want to host some kind of Hacktoberfest event at my university campus. Any ideas? Actually, yes, and that's a great question. Let me make a quick pause here from the slides. If you come to your Google search and type mlh.link slash Hacktoberfest, I think. Let's open this and let me see. Okay, yeah. No, maybe I write it wrong. Yeah, I forgot a K here. My bad. Oh, oh my God. Okay. Well, um, I'm sure there's a short link for this. I'm sorry, I didn't learn it. But if you go to hacktoberfest.com, and don't worry, I will share this on the comment section, you will find the official page And one of the partners, of course, it's the mailing hacking, and this is brought to us here. So if you go to participation, join, share beginners. Okay, I'm not finding these events. View all events, explore, event organizers, set a date and register. Here, how to organize Hacktoberfest event. Register your event with the Fest and the Mail Hacking. Use this form to register your event, and then you will be followed with this. Register your event with Mail Hacking, and this is the link I should share with you. Give me a second. So we're almost mid October, so I will recommend you aim for a late October date and try to make your submission as quick as you can. So we are so glad you hosted an event, a part of the Hacktoberfest 2025. The events are hosted on Merely Hacking's organized HQ platform. It's a simple way for passionate organizers to run events for their communities. This can be hosted in person or online, and our team at Amelie Hacking reviews each application. If your application meets our quality standard, it will be approved, sorry, and you can start hosting. What will you receive? If I understand well, you'll be provided with swag, right? Or yeah, with swag. Uh-huh. So you can continue, blah blah, and you will need to create an account to be aware of that. What else? Oh, well, I think that solves your question. Yeah, no worries. I'm on Quarks. So let's continue here. Okay, great. Let's move. Git and GitHub basics. Let's start with what again it's Git and what again it's GitHub. Then we are going to cover the whys. Git, version control system. What's a version control system in simple terms? And this is going to just be a slide from this session. Don't worry if you already know Git and GitHub, and if you don't worry either of saying, "Oh, I won't have enough information here." But what I will recommend is that during the Global Hack Week, we usually have one GitHub session on giving you more introduction on how to use Git and GitHub, right? I recommend you go and check out the previous streams so you can find it, but we'll cover the simples, the most easy way, right? Version control system, it helps you preventing from doing things like uh, final version, final version 1.0, final version 2.0, final version, now it's the final one, final version. It helps you managing the versions of your project, but more than that, also it helps you collaborate because it allows you to do things like branching, so you can work on certain features of your project or trying to fix some bugs, and another colleague tries or have the ability to um, implement other solutions, and then you merge. There is a full workflow about this. Git it's itself a big topic, but in the general scope, in the big picture, that's what it helps you to managing projects, managing versions of a, well, yeah, of a project, right? And GitHub, it's oh, GitHub, it's like the final layer of Git, and it's a platform where you can host these things that I'm sorry I didn't mention. There are repositories, and a repository is where the Git um, version control system lives, between quotes again. So you create a local version of your project, you add it to Git, and you push it to GitHub, which is the platform, and you now have an online repository that every other people, if that's a public repository, can access, can learn from it, can reproduce, can execute, can modify, can create things like this. You know why this stands for open source, right? That it makes sense at this simple explanation. So it also provides another layer of collaboration, which is things like issues, discussions, and automations. Um, and if you're interested in automations and all good practices, we are going to cover a little in these sessions, but you can check the sessions from the past year, and I give some useful automation that you can use at your projects. But you can check that later, right? So that's the basics of getting GitHub. Now I am going to expose you to some lingo that it's commonly used in open source, that you probably think, what's that before? If you heard of it but nobody explained to you, well, this is the moment. Also, if you have another in mind, like, oh, Alberto, I also heard this other one, but I don't know what is it. I tried to Google it, but it's kind of also good that you try to explain it to me, because you're a person, right? Repo, repository. It's but another thing is that, well, some of these are like short terms, but they have like the full name. For example, repo, it's repository itself. So we already mentioned that a repository, it's the project or the folder containing the files and the version history. Again, like the Git living inside this repo. Now, fork, when you create a copy of an existing repository, you fork your someone else's repository to have a local copy, well, and your version of it. You can modify, you can create and update and make some other branches. You can even delete the whole project. That doesn't mean the original repository that you forked uh, will be modified. One example of this, it's I was going to say one Web3 analogy. For example, if you are familiar with Web3 or crypto, or a crypto enthusiast, sorry, you probably know Bitcoin, and you probably know there are some forks around Bitcoin. So you have Bitcoin Lite, for example, which in its core it's the same, but at some point the community didn't get along on how to do certain things, so they forked, they divided ways. One project go from one direction and the other go from other direction, but they shared a common background, right? The same happened a lot of times in Bitcoin. That's why I have this really in mind. But another great example. Actually, I haven't. I don't know if this is true, but I haven't. I have heard it. If someone wants to run a fact check here, um, Windsurf, the other one. What's the name of this? Cursor. Yeah, I think it's Cursor actually. Are forks from Visual Studio Code, right? Because Visual Studio Code, you can have, it's open source. You can access directly if you type here, for example, GitHub. So this is a repository of Visual Studio Code. I can fork it. Actually, there are three, almost 36 thousand forks of this, and you can modify and do things like, okay, this could be interesting. But let's check for the existing forks, right? And oh no, I don't want to fork it. Actually, I want to create the ones that are fork. No, can I fork your own copy? No, I don't. Okay, I don't want to fork my own copy, but let's take a look to cursor GitHub. Did this have a? Okay, I don't think this have a GitHub. Well, another thing to mention, for example, it's that even one project it's open source. If you fork it, it doesn't mean you need or the fork project it's going to be open source. For protections like that, um, you have things like license. But don't worry, we are going to cover that in a second because you may be thinking like, oh, imagine I create or me and my community create a big project like Visual Studio Code. Imagine your community, it's named um, Microsoft, and someone steal from us and just fork the project and then start charging people for it. You will think that's not fair. There are licenses that protects your creations, and again, it doesn't mean it. Even if it is open source, it doesn't mean you are not allowed to charge, and this should be free. No, not free as in gratis, not in, as in no cost, as in these kind of things. It's free as in you can access the source code, you can see it, you can inspect what's happening, you can have full visibility of the source code. Um but again, I hope that clarifies what a repository is, one what a fork is. Now, you clone when you create a local copy of it. Yeah. Um, Imagine you want to clone. Again, let me return to the previous example, Visual Studio Code. If you put attention here, let me try to make this bigger for you. I have the option to forget, but I also have the option to clone it. Now, if I clone this directly from the Microsoft repository, I probably won't have permissions to do a lot of things. I probably will have permissions to push back again to this repository, to this remote repository, anything. And GitHub, sorry, and Microsoft, it's not even to put attention of what I am doing. The appropriate thing to do is to fork the project, to have your own copy of this repository living in your account, and then you clone a local copy of your personal of your fork of your of your personal repository from this, right? So it may be confusing at first, but don't worry, just think about this specific. If you have access permissions from the organization, you don't need to create a fork. If you are part of organization of a company, of a group of people developing, you don't need to be the owner of the repository because you have permissions. Then you only clone it to your computer, you create a local copy of it, and you can start working it. If you don't have permissions, if you're not part of the organization, if you're not part of the people maintaining and creating and living and everything of this project, you can fork it to create your own version of that repository of that project, and then you clone it to your local system, and you can start making changes, and you can start how to say that, uh, pushing to your local fork. Now, the difference, again, it's that when you fork, you create a new repository. When you clone, you don't create another repository. between quotes again. You do create another repository, but it's a local one and it's attached to the remote one, right? Um, yeah, I'm sorry if that's confusing and I didn't explain it the right way. Uh, for you to don't confuse, let me rephrase it again. In both, you actually create different repositories, uh, but just keep in mind what I mentioned. If you can modify and you have permissions to directly work on your remote repository like this, you clone it. Let's say I'm a developer at Microsoft, right? So I'm probably part of the organization. I am like, yeah, I am part of the organization that runs this, which is the Microsoft organization, right? Uh, yeah, people. If I am someone in this list, uh, there are 4.4, like 4,500 members. Um, if I was part of this list, I could directly clone this. I have access to do everything I need to work on this. Since I am not, probably same as the other 36,000 people here, I need to fork it and I can then modify and do things with my Visual Studio version. Got it? Great. Now, commit. Commit, it's part of the living workflow of the version control system that it's Git. When you work on Git, you have local changes. You have a version history, and that local changes are not tracked. When you add that local changes and start tracking them in your virtual system, you then uh, are in a staging area. This staging area will tell you if your local changes have differences between the ones that are already tracked and if you made more local changes. Then, when you're ready, actually, I do think the name it's pretty accurate and it's easy to understand because of the name. You commit yourself, you commit your changes, and you say, "I am ready to put this on my history in my version history," and that commit it is like a small fraction of your changes that are introduced in the local in the version history. Sorry. So when you first start a repository with nothing, the flow is create the template, create the first step, create the basics, even just create the files if they are empty. You are going to make the initialization of the repository. You add that to the staging area. You check that everything that it's on the staging area, you are going to move that. But hey, you realize one file it's not supposed to be there, but you don't want to delete it because that's going to be in another commit. Let's think you got inspired on creating the initialization, and initialization you proposed was just creating empty files, but you thought like, okay, I can move myself and I can add one readme, but for a reason you don't want this to be in this initialization but in a next commit on in a next point of the version history. You remove it from the staging area. You do have that in your local changes, but there's not on the staging. So then when you commit it, when you're ready to make sure your changes are there, you add a message or something, and again these are good practices to inform what's happening in this commit, in repo initialization, right? And that's all. You push then your local changes to the remote repository. Push. Remember that in a second. And then you have one local change that it's the readme that we mentioned. You add it again to the staging area, and then you commit again. And now in your version history, you have two commits. And we can inspect and see in the version history with tools like Git Kraken, which I love. You need to take a look. Actually, let's do that. Let's take a look to uh, Git Kraken. With things like this, you can take, for example, these each one of these rounded knots here. It's one commit, and you will see how from commits there start a new version history. These are the branches, these lines. When they are merged, this is the merge. You merge changes from one version history into another, and you have your final project, which is the main one, right? um, yeah. Well, also, since you're students and you have your GitHub developer pack, you have access to uh, code Git Kraken and other products from your company completely free. So again, mlh.link slash GitHub, and you can access to the student developer pack, right? Let's do that. mlh.link. Oh my god, I'm writing terrible. Slash GitHub. In my case, this is going to redirect me to applicate. Okay, I am denied. We're figuring out this, but if you start an application, you will see. What else? What else? What else? Okay, okay. Let's follow. Branch, a parallel version of a of your main branch of your history. I show you the graphical way to explain this with Kraken. Remember again. Let me look for a good visualization of this. There's one I even love more. That's from the. Oh my god, I have that here. Git Lens, yeah. Git Lens Pro. Here, for example, you have one, two, three, four branches. These lines here, each line here represents a branch. They all start with one branch, which will be your main branch, and then you're going to create ramifications out of it to, I don't know, create a new feature to solve a bug, but you constantly have your main branch. Um, a common flow is to have a main one, a develop one, and from the develop have each branch depending if you want to call them feature, like in this one, chore, fix, docs, for example, if you're documenting something, tests, if you're adding testing to some part, things like that. So you create branches around in Git to manage your different versions, right? And then you merge them, and well, I think I already explained that. For merging or for coming together these different branches, we have this very common one called the PR or the pull request. It's an ask to merge your changes, right? It's a proposal. Why don't merge them directly? Well, if you're working alone, I mean, like, go ahead. It's up to you. I even do recommend doing pull requests to keep track and to have a better document version history. But hey, you're free to do it. But in open source, since you're working in collaboration, you probably are not the owner of the project and things like that. You do have pull requests. So you create a pull request to ask the owners, the maintainers, to merge your changes. And well, this is when all the open source workflow and magic start happening, right? Then you have issues, for example, which is report bugs or desired features from the community inside a project. Let's return to the Visual Studio Code. We have 800 pull requests and more than 5,000 issues report. So for these pull requests, so we can see that this one says pick up latest types, trust types, add experimental settings to show all models, uh, short fixed text version. So since this is talked with Chore, this probably it's related to an issue, right? Uh, 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 mm, mm, mm. Okay, no, it's not. Okay, but we can see. Um, so the issues for it. Well, let's return to that to see what happened. This pull request should resolve several CG alerts related to CG manifest with Git dependencies. What files changed were four, and this is how internally Visual Studio Code works. Um, the CG manifest, some commit hash, CG manifest JSON, and well, yeah, just these ones. Well, these four files were changed, so in order the rest of the things work. Well, that's it. Now, issues, and this is you will see where the magic again start happening. So, people are reporting feature request support MCP resource context for testing generation in VS Code. So what happened here is that it says currently we're generating test cases in Visual Studio running right click generate code, generate test. There is no option to specify an MCP resource as context. What's the point request? Please introduce an option to generate test flows as allows user to collect for reference MCP resource architectural guidance. And well, this is great because this was already assigned 12 minutes ago to a maintainer, right? So that was an approved feature. That's great. Jupyter Notebook fails to connect to kernel to Python. Does this occur when all versions are disabled? Just no, blah, 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 steps to reproduce. And also, this was assigned to an other developer. So this is great. This is going to be support. Also, great from this is just happening 13, 12, 1 hour, and a lot of things happening here. Um, Actually, I didn't take a look to that before. What's the difference between Git pull and Git push? Okay, that's a great question. When you're working again with remote repositories and you clone them, you have a local copy of them. But this communication, it's not always open. So imagine today in the morning, you just and you don't even fork. You create a project with one of your friends and you give him, you're the owner of the project, and you give him or her access to clone, modify, edit everything in the repository. You both are owners, right? Or administrators. And you clone it in the morning, and your friend clone it also in the morning. But things happen, you lost, I don't know, you have a problem, or you have too much homework to work on the project, and tomorrow your friend tell you, hey, I already have this feature done. I created a branch, which will be the best practice. I make a commit, or two, three, or five, or n number commits, And now that's ready in the branch, but you don't see reflected in your local repository. That's because your friend haven't pushed it. So your friend need to push their changes or his her changes, your changes, um, and then that will be living in the remote repository. But then you again don't see them in your local repository. Well, you need to pull them. If you don't pull them, you won't have your friend changes. And if you pull, but your friend didn't push them before you pull, you won't have them either. So that's basically what's pull and push. You push your changes, so the latest version of it will be in the remote repository. Remember, the remote repository should be centralized uh, piece of information containing everything. Your local repository maybe just it's containing your changes and it's keeping track of what you're working on. Your friend's local repository the same with his her changes, and you both need to be constantly pushing your work and pulling your collaborators works. uh, does that helps? I hope it does, Tammy. So let's continue. Yeah, so these are issues those are pull requests. Maintainer, and sorry, I already mentioned this a lot, but we're going to reach this point. The maintainer are the person managing, and this could be more than one, the repository, and in the other hand are the contributor, anyone submitting improvements, right? So here, for example, let's return to the thanks a lot. I understand. Perfect. Let's return to the Visual Studio example. Maintainers are the persons that are actually are doing, for example, the assignations of the pull request. Actually, probably here, these were given to a bot, I think. We check an example in which this was given to a bot. Uh, some of this. Well, this is great because actually we found a great example. Let's take both examples. The previous one, this VS Code engineering, it's the maintainer, right? Because it is not the one submitting the pull request. The one submitting the pull request is Deepu Harian, Deepu Hardiasan, and Deepu Hardiasan. It's submitting an issue. It's reporting to the maintainers this is happening and I want this fixed. So the maintainer assigns one of the collaborators. This collaborator it's the contributor, or it will be the contributor once it submit the pull request. Now that doesn't mean maintainers should expect every time uh, people around the community report these books. For example, this is a maintainer, probably also it's a collaborator, but in this case, it's working or it's functioning as the maintainer, since it's reporting a book and it's assigning someone in the team, a collaborator, to or well, yeah, a collaborator, and sorry. A contributor, sorry, to fix this, right? Start the main, open issue, and UEP, assign compiled, explain, branch says main, actually branch moves to blah, 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 right? So probably this is like an onboarding or something like that. But hey, it's really interesting to see the opportunity of having this. Now, thanking advantage that we are here, let's look for labels. Good first issue. Okay. Um, and you may be wondering why. Let's return here and we will see the anatomy of a repository, right? Again, you don't will see this in all cases, but should be the how a repository works. Some of these may vary depending, for example, the coding language you're using, if there's a source or documents or things like that, or a dist or an app or something. It will depend on your project. But at the root, you at least should have the README, which is a Markdown file. And if you're not familiar with Markdown files, let me show that really quick. These slides, for example, are built with Markdown. So Markdown, it doesn't mean it's for creating slides. Markdown, it's for text. It's marking languages. A marking language, sorry. So if I want to say, for example, one title, we have this like the first hashtag. If I want to make a smaller title, I have two hashtags. If I want to do something in bold, I wrapped it with this. If I want to create a list, I will say double dot, for example, this hyphen space, hyphen space, etc. That's a order list, sorry, on order list, an order list, number and space. You see the agenda. Uh, yeah, that's Markdown. And Markdown helps us a lot. And in this case, now let me open myself a repository. Um, GitHub slash Alberto, for example. Let me close all of this. Okay, here, for example, this is my README, not for a project, for my profile. And this is based on Markdown. If I modify this, you will see this is between quotes, Markdown. Well, I was going to say coding, but this is not coding. That there's a small difference there because this is not being compiled. This is just this is not able to do, for example, a mathematical operation. But this is Markdown. The same here happens, and even I added some. I did some cheating. I added some HTML, but Markdown is compatible with HTML. Um, yeah. I was going to say, for example, this is a comment in the future. I like to add more of non-dev stuff like pre-print, but I don't know. I'm thinking about that now. But this is my Markdown README profile, and each of my projects starts with a Markdown. For example, let's take a look to my repositories. Uh, the one I create for previous year open source project template. What you see when you enter an repository in GitHub, at least, I think this is not in many other platforms, but in GitHub, you will see this, the open source project template. And again, if we inspect how it looks in just plain text, this is how it looks. Now, GitHub has a markdown flavor, and I want to talk about that. Like, you can have many different markdown flavors. GitHub has this one. Um, but yeah, let's remember, for example, you can use emojis, you can use coding things, tips, or hyphens. Hmm, yeah, links, images, as you saw on my README with the dancing Mona. Uh, yeah, this is a README. Basically, the intention of the README is to understand the project in general. You can have things like these sections. Actually, this is an open source project template, so it's very correlated with what we want to do here, right? It's the name of the project, what project is and what it is for, how to install, how to use it, the documentation, if it has some testing, a contribution license, sorry, a contribution guideline, a license, the code of conduct, and we can explain a little this more for the healthy communities. Some acknowledgments, for example, these, not only this repository but in general everything I am talking in this series of session was inspired by the open source guide. Let's open that. This open source guide, it's from GitHub. It's open source.guide, and here you will see the best practice for security, maintainer balance for open source, maintaining balance for open source maintainers. So how to balance your life actually, how to contribute, starting, building welcoming communities, finding users, best practices, leadership and governance. I think this is one of the advanced ones, getting paid for open source work, the code of conduct, which is also really, really important. Drop the guide link here. Yeah, sure. Here it is. The metrics and the legal side. So actually, these one, two, three, and even the paid one, I would say they are one of the hardest topics around the open source. So let's return. Um, Contact. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach me out at alberto@camarena.me. Changelog, for example, if we want to add this section, I really appreciate it when I see in projects, and some disclaimers. If you want to add them, I mean, I mentioned it, and this is the intention of my disclaimer. Remember, every project is different, so feel free to adjust this template to your needs. This section can be add and remove. The goal is to provide a clear and consistent overview of the project, making it easier for others to understand and contribute. So that's what the README usually looks like. Now, license. Not sure about the license. Well, in this case, I'm using an MIT license. Permission it's hereby grant free of charge to any person obtaining a copy of this software. If you don't know where you get your license, I do have a page for this. Oh my god, what it was. I forgot to add this. I'm so sorry. But there's, yeah, Black Dog. I think it's this one. Oh my god, no, this wasn't. Oh, what I did. I think it was then. And the slides, PDF. Let's wait for this. Okay, yeah, there's the GitHub license speaker. Oh, this is not. Okay, sorry. Let me add the markdown. Uh, GitHub license speaker. Yeah, yeah. The URL, if you're interested, it's choosealicense.com. Here, same. I'm going to share it with you. Great. So the license in this case, okay, let me move everything. No, what happened? Oh my God, where? Let me find it because I have like two screens open. Give me a second. Where it is? Where it is now? Do I close it? I don't think I close it. Oh my god, where it is? I can find my own. Okay. If not, I can open a new one. So sorry. I think I close it, but I don't know where I leave it. So let's start again. So where we were, GitHub. What was it? Oh my god, sorry for the messing up here. Let me open it again. Okay, give me a second. I need to answer something. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry for that. I entered like in a small collapse because they were calling me. I needed to receive a package. My bad. Okay, I'm going to make use of this link I shared before. So it's chooselicense.com. And again, we're talking about the license. Taking count some of this, I need to work in community. I want a simple and permissive. I care about sharing improvements. You can use preferred by your community. If you're already in a community, probably they have a preference of this. If you want it simple and promising, as me, I am using the MIT license. If you care about sharing improvements, again, caring about things, usually implement GNU as in free software. My project is in software. I want more choices. I don't want to choose a license. Okay, more licenses are available. And here you will have a detailed graph of what these implements. Uh, so that's why I really love this tool. There's also the license for that are not software license for data, for example, for documentation, for specific fonts, for hardware. Um, so yeah, mixed projects, and even if you don't want, there's like a clarification of what will happen. So yeah, good thing to always add a license. For example, README also or GitHub also include this as in the front page. Also, contribution guidelines. If we remember, we will have these contribution guidelines. As in the say, how to report bugs, I create a bug report template. If you don't, just mention what they need to cover. But also adding templates, it's great for your projects, for all the project hosting and overall scope. Um, having this, and I want to make a pause for explaining this, having the ability to contribute not only in the value of the technical part, but if in these parts, like for example, you find a really great project, you probably will find all of this. You will probably find a GitHub folder containing some templates and automations. But if you don't, you can contribute that way. You can add a contribution to say, hey, I created this template repository, sorry, this template for submitted box. Why don't we implement this? And you can start discussing and talking with the maintainer to see what it's his scope. Remember, again, contributing to open source, it's more of the people part than of the technical part, right? In my experience, that's where it have the magic, where it has the flavor, where it gets exciting. So, how to suggest a new feature? Also, for creating an issues, there is the features request template. If a project that you find don't have it, well, you know how to contribute. So the pull request process: for the repo, create a branch, write the test, ensure test pass, commit and push, open pull request using this template, and also it has a template for creating pull request, right? Pull report, feature, and pull request templates. So, yeah, that's the contribution guidelines. If you want and you're inspired for doing like more detailed explanation, also, well, you're welcome to contribute even for this open source project template, how we can expand it and make it bigger. Actually, I mentioned this 5 months ago that I created this, and I have received not only one contribution, so that makes me sad. Um, but yeah, if you are happy to take a look to that, here's the link. And I recommend you contribute to this template. Um, and finally, from this list, well, not finally, but from the Markdown files, the community expectations of the code of conduct. Again, how you choose the code of conduct. I got this one from Contribution Covenant, but this contribution method or code of conduct, sorry, my bad, um, it's pretty covering all that I wanted for my community. In this case, if some community is formed around this project, so demonstrating empathy, being respectful, giving graceful, the use of this type of language, it's not allowed. Not allowed to trolling, not allowed to harassment, not allowed of things that are not acceptable. And for responsibilities, the scope, the guidelines, and entry attribution here again to the contribution covenant, which it's inspired by Mozilla's code of conduct enforced leader, right? Uh, uh, um, we have a comment saying, "Well, I gotta leave now." Okay, yeah, had an insightful session, and we'll surely watch the recording. Yeah, thank you so much. If you have a question, also you can leave it here, and well, I will answer it, and you can watch the recording of that. Thank you so much for joining. And actually, since we're doing this pause, I think it's a great moment to mention that we will be like pausing for 10 minutes. So, in another 15 minutes, we're going to cut this session. So, you can go take a break, grab some water, do your needs, whatever you want. And we're going to be returning for the part two. I think, yeah, we won't have time to finish the first set, the first set of slides. We are going to finish this in the second part, and we are going to start with the building welcoming communities as well. And finally, the GitHub folder. I show you what I have in there. He's you can find templates and also the workflows. If you work with things like GitHub Actions, this is also where it lives. Again, I am not going to mention or going to work in GitHub Actions for this series of sessions, but I have done that in the past. You can find recordings in my only hacking stream account. If you go to ghw.mlh.io, you can find the link for the recordings. Source or docs, and again, this is for documentation or the source code, depending on your project. Now, let's talk about no-code contributions. Let me grab some water myself. Um, Also, I know this is a lot of information. This is not well. I will say it's a heavy session because all of the uh, theoretical part here. But I think it's worth watching and it's worth thinking of the open source itself as not only as contributing code. And that's why also I want to talk about non-code or even low code contributions. uh, you don't have to be that technically fluent, even if you're starting in programming, even if you're starting in software, even if you're starting in everything that's open source in general, you can contribute. Again, because contributing an open source, it's not about the skill, the technical skill. It's about communities, it's about people, it's about building relationships, it's about having a belief in a product, in a project, in your community, a desire and a shared goal, and putting your hands on working towards that. So as an example, you can contribute raising issues. We mentioned what an issue is. Imagine having the ability or having the time, even for thinking of the product that you want and sharing that vision with the rest of the community. So you open an issue to ask for a new feature. Let's say, hey, I realized that doing A, B, and C, you can, uh, I don't know. You're wasting a lot of time, and then why don't we make this process efficiency by cutting the skipping on tabs, for example, between A, B, and C. That's a contribution. You're sharing your mental process, you're sharing an vision of the product, you're doing open source. Even if you're not like confident enough to post your vision there, you can contribute in things like this: the fixing typos or improve documentation. What could be an improvement of documentation? You may think like, oh, I read this, it's perfect. No documentation, it's perfect, but I read this, it's perfect. There's nothing else to do. I'm probably well, not I'm probably not. I'm sure many of you watching me are not English speakers natively, right? You mentioned oh, I think I remember someone mentioned Colombia around here. Okay, don't worry. It doesn't matter. The point is that you probably speak more than one language. So main documentation it's in English because it's the science language. So it's the base one. But imagine trying to do this more accessible for a lot of people. For me, I will try to document or write a documentation for others in Spanish, and not only copy pasting in ChatGPT or Google Translate, because we need to have like the deep understanding on what technically they want to say, and the ability to translate it in our local language, right? Or in my case, Spanish. That's the second example, right? the translating text. Also, if you're a designer, or if you're a more graphical person, or if you realize that the UI of the product is not that aesthetically pleasant, you're free to design things like logos or graphics, pages, even make your statement or your opinion on UI flows, UX, sorry. Um, and one thing that's very important if you're like, for example, more of frequent use of a tool, you'll probably find a bug. You'll probably find something that's not working as it should, or it's not working properly. These testing and reporting bugs, it's also super important. Again, that's one of the main powers of open source. We have a lot of eyes on it. And if you're and I want to clarify, I'm not talking here about automate tests, not writing about code testing. No, I'm talking about if you don't add, I don't know, a full name in the login, it allows you to enter, but then it breaks because it's trying to access without a full name. I don't know, something like that. I'm talking about the use cases of actually using the product, right? So, raising issues about your vision, your logos, your box, your documentations process, things like that. It does require you to write code around it. It requires you to be in love with the product, to use it, to have a shared vision. And even if the project is that good enough for having community guidelines or having contribution guides, for having a discussion panel, and we will talk about that in more in the future, where people can talk and open threads about the future and the vision of the project. You can start contributing, and you're already part of the community, even if you don't contribute with code. You're contributing with more important things, that it's your presence. I mean, your participation in the community. Um, yeah. Also, all these contributions not only are, I won't say easy, but they are not technically challenging. I want to say uh, they also are super important for making projects grow and stay healthy. So think twice the next time you are not sure about contributing, or that you say, I don't know, I don't enter open source because I am not like technically or skilled enough. That's not true. That's not true. That's a myth. You don't need to. You just need to be there, be part of the community, be involved, speak yourself up. Well, in this case, right. But yeah, that's contributing to open source, and there are non-code contributions. Of course, contributing with code, it's also important, and it's also what we are trying to achieve here in the future. But I want to say again, these non-code contributions are the base. On top of this, we build with code. So, uh, maintainer's perspective, from the maintainer's perspective, I want to say they appreciate contributions that are clear. For example, and then we can return here on the Visual Studio Code GitHub. Also, this is enforced by the templates, but if we see the pull requests, for example, we see they say, okay, this is not well documented. Okay, here Resolve. What this is for? This resolves the error invalid problem match reference es build watch using problem matcher. How you do it, what it fixed, that's clear, right? That are focused. Don't make pull request contributions that are like, oh, I fixed this and this and this and just one pull request. We know like you probably are capable of that, but in terms of reviewing that, just do atomic contributions. Focus on one problem, do one change or one fixed around it, and document it. That's the third part. If you, for example, if you're doing an UI change, I love when they take these screenshots. They say like, okay, these button were broken at this resolution in this device at this browser, blah blah blah. I fix it, and now it looks like this. I even, for example, where I worked, I implement temporal deployments, so the reviewers could see it live, not only in code. And well, I don't want to throw flowers on myself, but I loved it. And also respectful. And one clarification here: uh, don't try to be like the smart, you know what follows that, uh, of hey, I came to your project and I fixed it because it was working wrong. Everybody has a typo sometimes. Everyone has issues in their code. So be respectful when you proceed in maintaining or contributing a project. Um, that's also why it's the code of conduct form. So stick to the contribution guidelines, stick to the code of conduct if you're planning on contributing. If you're planning of being a maintainer, well, enforce your community to have a great environment, right? And saying that, let's do this pause because it's almost 10 minutes before we enter to the next session. So I will see you. We're going to leave it here and we are going to return in 10 minutes to continue with this. And after we finish this, we have a small code session for cloning a repo and doing that first contributions that are like going to be mocks because that project is going to be hosted by me. But I think it will help you to get started on this. And then we can pass to the maintaining healthy communities. So thank you for joining me this session. Stay tuned. We're going to continue. We are going to make this small break of 10 minutes. And before I forgot, here's the link, mh.link slash global hack week feedback. Let me just make sure this works. Um, yeah, it does. So share with the rest what you think of this session, please. That'll help us a lot. And let's make that pause, and I will see you back in 10 minutes.